Hi, my name is John Light, and I've spent over 20 years working throughout all corners of the recruiting world. Our podcast, Drowning in the Tech Talent Pool, is a resource to help you stay afloat and get ahead of your competition. Hi, and welcome to Drowning in the Tech Talent Pool. I'm your host, John Light, president of Sabretooth Tech Talent, and I have with me today Nick Colisto, who is the Chief Information Officer at Avery Dennison. And I wonder, Nick, a couple of things. Number one, we'd love for you to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your journey to get where you are today. But I don't know if there are a lot of people out there who hear Avery Dennison as a household name. I think I'm used to seeing the name at the printer in an office setting than I am anywhere else. So maybe a little bit about not just what got you there, but you're sitting in a pretty big chair in a pretty big company. So I'd be curious to know what a day in the life is like as well. And especially with all the changes we're seeing in the tech world with generative AI and so on hitting the marketplace.
Yeah, no, that's great, John. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. It's great to engage with the audience and have this sort of interactive conversation about IT and talent. It's a very important topic. More than ever, and so Avery Dennison is a global materials science company that specializes in the manufacture of and the design and the manufacturing of a wide variety of labeling and functional materials. Most people know us about the Avery label that was that you can buy in Staples years ago. We actually sold to a business, but people recognize us from that company. So we have grown into a lot of different markets since then. We're headquartered in Mentor, Ohio. We were headquartered in Glendale. I was living in LA for the last 4 years, and we moved our headquarters to Ohio. We employ over 30,000 employees worldwide and in over 50 countries. And our reported sales last year was $9 billion. But before I joined, just to give you a little bit of background, before I joined Dennison in 2018, February of 2018, I served, before that, I served as the global CIO for a $5 billion publicly traded company as well. It was Xylem, XYLEM. It was a spin-off from ITT. And then I was also the CIO before that for 7 years. I was at Augmenting Enterprises. I was a residential home builder. That was interesting because I was there during the, sort of the economic downturn. So, and then
it's Cahovinian, right? I've seen that. I've seen their signage.
Yeah, Augmenting is the name. The company is also known as Augmenting Enterprises, depending on what you have. But yeah, and I spent years at and pharmaceutical and CPG companies before that. So fun fact. I always like to share this fact. I worked for 14 people. I counted 14 people over the course of my 36 or 39-year career, depending on how you want to count my career. My wife says I can't count my career until I graduated college, but I like to count before I worked full-time in college. So I guess I think I can count that. Now, the reason why I want to count that is because I worked for 14 people over the course of my I shouldn't age myself like that, but over the course of my career, and 50% of my managers were women. And it's pretty amazing to think about that because back in the 80s and early 90s, there weren't a lot of women in IT. And I think that really gave me just incredible appreciation for, insights and respect and appreciation for women in leadership roles. And that really has shaped me, as a IT practitioner, but also a leader in IT, heavily influenced my career. So I'm very fortunate to have experienced that over my career.
Can I riff on that for just a second and ask you a question? What's your college experience, undergrad, graduate, whatever? What were your your?
So I went to Pace University in New York. I lived in New York all my life. I've lived in New York most of my life, and in New Jersey, then LA, now in Florida. So I'm based in Florida. So I went to Pace University, and I have an undergraduate degree in information systems and a graduate degree in management information systems.
I recorded a podcast a week or two ago with a lady who is in a flatter organization, very nimble organization. She's a VP of IT, but she effectively functions as her CIO and CISO. And what fascinated me was that her undergraduate degree was in some human sciences, had zip to do with IT. Now, she's probably close to our vintage. How do you put it politely? You know, my mom always said, never ask a woman her age or she'd get mad at me. My mom would get mad at me. But I wonder how that journey of yours was impacted by starting off, you know, on that foot, if you will, versus someone who started off, you know, the degree in the humanities or human science, who's now, you know, along the way had to really demonstrate technical skills. When you and I know, look, we've been around the block. You've had, I don't know how big your team is now, don't need to know, but I'll tell you what, it's bigger than 99% of the CIOs out there.
Yeah,
you know,
I'll say, I mean, it's not confidential.
Globally.
Yeah, it's over 600 people. We're in 28 countries. So IT is in 28 of the 50 countries. So I've got a great HR organization that helps you with all these metrics. So
yeah, so I mean, they're all over the place. But you understand as well as I do, when you're hiring at that scale or anything at scale, it can be really hard to vet talent and figure talent out. But if you don't have the right talent on board, whatever your strategy is, almost doesn't matter because you can't execute on it, right? And so I'm curious if you feel like going down that path that you went down out of college and obviously with a great work ethic, even though your wife maybe doesn't want to recognize it out of the gate and throw, what do you put a 4 in front of your career number? I've been working at this for 40 years now. You know, I'm curious what your take is when you look at talent and you look out there and you look at the people who have helped you and you look at your mentors as well. You said about half of them have been women. I'm really curious to know, did they all come from that undergraduate educational IT bent, or were there people that kind of came? Because I know in accounting in the 80s, you could find CPAs who had English lit degrees.
Yeah.
Now you can't be a CPA in most states or with the AI CPA until you have not only your undergrad degree, but the equivalent of a master's with a whole bunch of advanced accounting courses. So I'm really curious from a historical, you know, kind of along the path viewpoint, what you've observed in that regard, both with the leadership, the 14 people you've reported to, and of course, what you've seen from your own personal experience dealing with people you might want to bring into your organization or develop and mentor.
Yeah, I'm just, it's a
big question.
It's a big question. You know, if I go back to the 14 and so the 7 of the 14 women leaders that I had, you know, so my first woman I worked for was in Mutual of New York Money Financial Services. That was, so I was like a junior accountant / like programmer. So so the person I was reporting at that point was not an IT. It wasn't training in IT, but because it was a mixed kind of role. But I graduated college. Yeah, so when I graduated college, then I worked for a woman who didn't have a college degree, which is very interesting. She was a very seasoned, Joanne Raimondo, if you're out there listening. One of my favorite bosses of my career, right? So she didn't have a college degree, and she did extremely well in Sterling Winthrop, which was eventually bought by Bayer. And she ran, I think, when I left, I think I heard she ran like the whole SAP practice in North America. I don't know for sure, but she had a very big role there. She was very, very excellent leader, great empathy, super smart, razor sharp, and she helped mold me into early in my career. But didn't have wasn't professionally trained in IT. So interesting, like you get there from different ways. I think now, if you fast forward now, it's like a mechanic using custom working on a traditional engine right now, having to work on a electric car. Very different. I think the complexity of IT today wasn't complex back then. It was a lot of programming, a lot of custom development back then. I think now is just the amount of options that you have, the level of sophistication of these technologies, the integration of these technologies, cybersecurity, infrastructure landscape, cloud computing, mobility. I think it's just so vastly different from what was back in the 80s. Yeah. Although there are positions, John, which I think are definitely have benefited from people that have. I was just interviewing someone today. Was an internal candidate that has no IT degree, but the person has a tremendous amount of supply chain and operations experience. Tremendous,
that's something you need.
And I need someone in that role, in this particular role, that has that experience. And he's got an MBA, he's got a BA, he's got an MBA, he's going for a PhD, just an incredible candidate. Yeah. So and he can interface with, happens to be a he, interface with our business partners. I don't call them the our business partners.
Right.
We're all partners in business. We're part of the business. And it probably very more effectively than other candidates that have maybe a very techie kind of background, of course. So the IT business partners, we used to call them liaisons. I think there you have more room to not be traditionalists in IT. But I think if you're getting into infrastructure, security, project management, business analysis, I think today I would favor people that have the IT background.
Yeah. So I did one of my favorite placements when I look back over history, because I've been doing the headhunting thing for a couple decades. And, there are people, I'll see a profile occasionally on LinkedIn, I'll look at it and go, did I place that person? I was thinking, did I place that guy or that lady? Because they're so familiar, but it might have been, 18 years ago or something. But there's this cadre of people that I just, they're top of mind all the time. And there's one in particular, she can figure out who it is if Myra's listening. I know I'll invite her to come listen to the podcast, but I placed her at a very large natural resources company in what I suppose functionally was an IT role within her SAP group. But she was a CPA who had a lot of financial reporting experience and was a power user of SAP. And what she really did is she was that fusion of a specific expertise, financial reporting, into the IT world, bringing that expertise. So then bringing that on the flip side of that, taking that IT piece and pushing it out. But to get there, you first got to bring in, what does a financial report need to look like? How does it need to come together? Starting from the chart accounts and the master data behind it, and just all the way up the growth chain. And she ended up being there a decade or so, had a fabulous run. And I remember I love those fusion kind of roles, because it gives me, as AI comes out, World Economic Forum sponsored a study, and they said, I think it was by 2025 or 2026, that 87 million job categories, I guess you could say, are going away. They'll be displaced or replaced. People will in them by AI. But it should create another 92 or 3 million jobs. And so replaced or displaced is almost this code word or code speech, if I could say it that way, for, hey, we need to reinvent ourselves. We need to show that we're resilient and we're resourceful, reinvent ourselves. And the idea that there are pathways for people to take what they know and bring that knowledge, that training, whatever it might be, into other areas. To me, that's kind of exciting, that fusing that together, reinventing yourself, carving out maybe not a new career path, but something that's novel to you, and frankly, over the next 3 to 5 years, in a lot of respects, some of this is going to be really novel to everybody. Right?
No, I agree. I think, roles like prompt engineering will become, commonplace, hiring prompt engineers, right? So, like I said, a lot of new jobs will be created, a lot of, routine jobs that can, repetitive type of routine jobs that could be automated will be replaced. But we're in a hype cycle now too, so I don't get totally excited about AI.
Right.
I spent a lot of time thinking about it and studying it and ideating and experimenting and looking at vendors. I just came back from Northern California. We visited with 7 different vendors, and we're constantly leaning in. But I'm also just like, we've been here before, so we can get into a whole conversation about how we've been here before. But so just being careful that we don't overhire, and then we have people sitting on their hands. So you don't
want to overhire, but at the same time, you can't neglect the day-to-day business that has to occur today. And that's
you got to get it right. You can afford to make some mistakes, but you don't want to underhire, right? And you don't want to have to overhire because of the hype, and then you go through that, trough of disillusionment, as Gartner likes to say, right?
Oh yeah, I need to remember that one. I need to work trough of disillusionment somewhere.
Yeah,
we're going to get a few of those.
Right now, we're still in the hype. We're in that curve.
We're still in the hype, but when you kind of look back over the last couple of years, the tech companies, big tech companies, had all these layoffs. And they lay off people in AI and data science and machine learning? I'm sure they laid some off, but they laid a lot of people off their administrative related functions. First level recruitment, administrative, and so on and so forth. Probably because they overhired in part as a reaction going into the lockdowns from COVID. But at the same time, I think I haven't run across this as a client of ours yet, but I have heard there are some large companies that are starting to shed developers, programmers, and such like, because I can go use generative AI to create or put together 80% of the code I need. And then I have to go in and edit it or oversee it.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I definitely agree. Yeah. 'Cause coding is certainly one of them. You think about generative AI. You think about it. I have this little mnemonic that I use called TIVA. So it's text. You can generate text. You can generate images, video, audio, and then of course the coding doesn't come into the TIVA. So coding is certainly I have to add that, right? So then there's coding, which is automatically generated. So there's a lot of So when we think about generative AI. I think initially we all thought about ChatGPT and novel and original text, but it's much more than that. So you use categories of, and of course you see now on LinkedIn, you see these wheels of these, I call it the TIVA wheel, plus, and then you see these different technology companies that are coming out of the woodwork. But just remember, we've been here. If you think about the .com boom in the early 90s and 2000s. Oh, let's forget about that. That was so different. Oh yeah, okay, that was different, right? And how about 3D printing in 2010? How about VR and AR in about 2010 as well? Blockchain, anybody? Yeah. IoT, and even AI machine learning was a surge in demand for AI experts and data scientists. And some organizations really overhired and overinvested in these initiatives, and without clear use cases and for integration to your other business processes, and failed miserably, right? So it's, and I think we're going to find this too. We're going to find, and by the way, AI is really expensive. I mean, Google,
yes, it is.
Microsoft a few weeks ago, what did they say? They said that Copilot's going to cost $30 a seat. Well, I got 20,000 users. We got 3,000.
I'm sorry, I've seen that look before from people when they start talking about this thing.
I'm not going to tell you my price I pay for Google right now for Google Workspace, which is $265 in Google. It's a lot less than $30 a person, right? Now, I know that's a list price, but I think Google is going to probably do something similar with it. They have announced something.
Oh, they have to.
So if it's a quarter of that price when you get to negotiations, that's going to be double what you're paying today, right? Potentially, right? So you start adding in, but I need this, I need Jasper, I need Midjourney, and I need Synthesia, all these different tools to fill out that wheel. If there's real use cases in that wheel. It's going to get incredibly expensive. And that Salesforce and Oracle and SAP, all of them are going to say, well, you want the AI version of our software. Ooh, okay. Press this button and you can pay more of your subscription. Just like,
hey, we'll let you pay that subscription if you just push the button.
Just like the Tesla, you buy a Tesla, right? And so I owned a Tesla, and you want it to be, auto drive. Press this button, you pay $15,000 more. Oh, you want it to go faster? You want to go press this button for $5,000, it can go faster. So that's the world. And I think if you start doing all the math on this, you better have some really good ROI on these projects. And that's what we're going through now. We're going through this, but you have to remember there's the Gartner hype cycle, which I think is fantastic, is that's really the technology trigger, which is the introduction of the technology. It's the sort of the peak of inflated expectations. So you get this, I think that's what we're going in. So this optimistic hype that we're getting into now. Then you have this trial of disillusionment, which is like, it's not paying off. And then you have that sort of slope of enlightenment, which means that, okay, all right, now we've got some solid use cases that can earn us some payback, maybe in customer service or digital marketing, whatever.
What's real.
It's real. That's when you start getting, and then you start, but it doesn't peak like the peak of inflated expectations. It peaks maybe here, right? And then it kind of plateaus. And you get widespread adoption. That's how Gartner defines it. It's a wonderful model. And they have a 4-part series now. I was listening to it on a podcast. I'm a big podcast person myself. It was actually, I listened to the podcast, I think it was this morning, actually, believe it or not. And yesterday or today. And they were talking about this. It's a 4-part series on the hype cycle. And it's just fascinating. I found it.
Well, I mean, it's part of it has to do with the tech. Part of it's just people.
Yeah,
I mean, how we look at stuff, I mean, It's like when you're young and you're dating and you have a date and you feel like you're really connected, you're on cloud nine, and 2 weeks later you're like, what on earth am I wasting my money on to go to dinner,
Right.
or to go hang out or whatever it might be? I don't sit back and look at what's going on right now, this hype cycle, as necessarily a bad thing, but it's something where I think you're correct. We don't know 100% what's real. And I really think the frontier for machine learning, as well as AI in the generative sense, is how do you apply it? How can you apply it in a way to drive efficiency and effectiveness without having to mortgage your future to the
Right.
degree that if it doesn't work out, you're hamstrung or dead in the water? And I think that's the Wild West right now, right? Because I had a CTO candidate, and he didn't get the opportunity in November of last year. He went out, and I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but he developed his own AI chatbot, and managed to adapt it to call centers for inbound and outbound, and for retail kiosks in all places in the cannabis industry, which I can't imagine. I mean, if it were me and I was doing a kiosk at a dispensary in Colorado or someplace, I would have some psychedelic colors and other images just because I could, and maybe sell vending machines, bags of brownies and chips and stuff. I'd go all out.
Yeah.
But I know, I think it was the first 30 days in after you starting in the kiosks, bumped sales like 37 or 8%. I mean, did really well. Considering you don't need as much head count, which is, there's your displacement aspect of things. But this is a guy who basically did it on his own.
Right.
And it was his cradle to grave. It was his, if you put all your eggs in one basket and you really watch that basket, he did that. And in a handful, maybe even a double handful of months, this guy, who is not in one of the big tech centers geographically, he's not in San Francisco, he's not in New York, he's not wherever. He's just a guy in the Midwest who put this stuff together and took off like a rocket. But I think there's going to be a lot of entrepreneurialism driving specific applications of this that will outperform what a lot of the big boys are trying to do, at least in the near term.
Yeah, I heard something last week. Well, I was actually in San Francisco, San Jose, I should say, but they said, I read this thing and said, what is it, like majority? Was it 2/3 of all the AI talent in the U.S., the talent, the assets, all the investment dollars, the venture capitalists, all of that around AI is in 15 cities. And I think it was like, and I think the top cities were, that's why it caught my attention, was San Francisco and San Jose. Like that was, so, and the podcast was talking about, like, is that a good thing that we have such a concentration of AI in these 15 cities when, there's many, cities around the country that have 100 million plus, people, population that don't have a sort of benefit. So are we getting the same sort of group think? Are the same scientists, working on AI?
Or generating the same stuff, basically. Yeah.
Interesting sort of like, sort of like debate about it. Like, is that good or bad for the,
It is.
You think it's bad or good?
No, I think it's a good debate to have.
Yeah, it's a good debate. Yeah.
What got me into recruiting on the tech side of things, I differentiate. I think there's a lot of overlap between IT and tech, but I think they're kind of in some ways pulling apart. Tech's like AI in a theoretical sense. Machine learning has been around since what, 50s ish?
Yeah, it's
last century. But the computing power wasn't there, and the computing power is an IT function. But the theory of AI, going into the theory of mind, kind of the next iteration of it, that's something that was textbook, wasn't necessarily dependent on Ethernet connections, data flow, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So I kind of sit back and look at it from we got to figure this thing out. And is concentration the right way, or more of a democratization relative to geography of this expertise? Because I'll tell you right now, I don't know if you've noticed this, but on LinkedIn in the past 6 months, I've calculated that somewhere in the neighborhood of 73.2% of everybody on LinkedIn is an AI expert. You may not have noticed that, but I see it every day.
Yep. Yeah. It reminds me of, are we momentum makers or momentum takers, fakers? Yeah. So yeah, it's like, is it real or is it just a lot of noise out there, right?
I think there's a lot of real, and I think you do too. I think we all do. But
No,
what
there's
percentage
a
is
lot of real.
real?
Yeah.
Versus the hype. That's the question, and I think that goes down to what's the application. We have AI in our ATS, our applicant tracking system, that will generate a complete candidate outreach program for us in a few heartbeats.
Mm-hmm.
But when you read it, I look at it and I go, all right, that's not me. I need to put me into it a little bit, and it doesn't need to be so spammy, and the syntax is not quite what I'd expect it to be. I read a great article in the HBR, Harvard Business Review, where the writer posits that we're in the throes of moving from the creator economy to the editor economy. And I thought that was really interesting because, as you know, AI doesn't actually create or innovate something novel. It takes from the data sets you fed it, does a bunch of algorithmic contractions and expansions, and synthesizes something which could be novel, but it's still made up of a bunch of things that data was fed. Bringing things together that are very abstract, far apart, is going to be a challenge for it for a while, I think.
The definition of generative AI is novel and original content, but it's like you're right. It's based on existing content that it uses to predict, this new content, and it does a really good job with it. But here's my take on the talent piece of AI. I think it's going to replace certain routine and repetitive tasks. We talked about that. Lots of different industries. It's going to impact jobs, and as you said earlier, it's going to create new opportunities related to AI development for sure. The maintenance of all these AI programs and also the implementation of AI. So that'll just create new jobs. I think people will learn new skills and remain relevant. I don't have a concern that that's going to happen, and the job landscape is going to evolve. I think it's just not going to replace jobs and also augment human capabilities.
Yes.
Look at Microsoft Copilot and now Google Duet are going to augment. Going to help people generate content, help them make better decisions. I think enhance overall performance. Those are all things that these tools I'm experimenting now with Google Duet. It's certainly very helpful.
And it should help us to be more of what we are. Really, I mean, what we're good at.
Just be faster and better. I think it's going to help us be faster and better at what we do. But then there'll be a surge for AI talent, as you're talking about. So you're going to see a surge for like data scientists, machine learning engineers, AI researchers will be.
I am totally in favor of that, just so you know.
But ethical considerations too, John. I think you're going to see roles come out of this that are born focusing on the ethics of AI, right?
Yes.
So issues related to bias and privacy and transparency, accountability. I think these are new roles that the only way we talk about ethics, we're not really sure how it's all going to pan out. I think there's going to be new jobs focused on ethics.
Oh, I think there will be too. I think you're totally right. And one of the questions I actually was fiddling with earlier in the conversation is when you look out there, and I'm not asking for trade secrets here, but I'm wondering what's in your mind about this. How do you, as a leader of an organization, how do you evolve that organization with the marketplace? So, for example, and you may have listened to the podcast that we put out with Mo Dastagir, who was the third hire Amazon India, and then a decade later he's a CTO at Sears, and he's dealing with mainframes. In 2019, and there's just one guy in the building who understands how it works.
Right.
Well, so he had to get in, and you have to defend the territory, the talent you have, I suppose, and he had to help this person, had to upskill him in a way that was tailored for him to get him to where he wanted to go in his career, but with the idea we're going to do this while we're moving to the cloud and we're getting off the mainframes and we're leaving old tech behind and all this sort of thing. How do we navigate that, you think, coming up? I mean, and someone who's got a small organization, I think, has similar problems and some different problems that someone has a larger organization, because you've got you got resources that somebody, say a medium-sized enterprise, medium-sized business can't touch.
Right.
So what should be the philosophy driving that evolution?
I think, so we're talking specifically about AI at this point, right? So this is all about, still on the AI topic. All right. So when ChatGPT came out in November, it became really popularized probably like the February timeframe. And then, it became this, a swarm of activity, this euphoria around ChatGPT. So a lot lot of IT leaders, small, medium, large companies said, no, don't use ChatGPT for work purposes because, we don't trust that it's going to, you're leaking information out to the internet. You don't want to be like,
Right.
You don't want to take your confidential data and put it into a publicly accessible, publicly ingestible environment, right? It's like putting confidential data on social media. You just don't do that, right? So a lot of companies, including ourselves, said no. We've got policies still today. It says do not put confidential data on these platforms. You can use the platforms, just don't put confidential data on them, right? And then we said no. And now we're moving from no, N-O, to no spelled K-N-O-W, right? And we're leading with learning, right? We're still saying no to not put confidential data on the internet. Don't use your Avery Dennison credentials to create ID for these tools so they can't associate it being Avery Dennison. As an example, I'm sure a lot of CIOs do the same thing and CISOs. But now we're moving to the no chapter, and we're leading with learning. It's about educating the organization on all forms of AI, particularly generative AI, but all forms. And then the education leads to ideation, right? And then experimentation. So that's what we're doing. I think many companies are in this sort of mode right now is let's go identify the most promising use cases that we can possibly apply either AI or other technology. So I think it's created this sort of surge in, let's identify problems to be solved, right? What is the job to be done, right? And that's what's happening right now, I think, in many different industries. And then that's going to help inform, John, I think the 2024 budget, maybe the last half of this year. But I think it's good timing that this happened like this time because it's going to inform, the balance of the year, but also 2024, major priorities. And the question is, do you roll out that next ERP system, next year for $15-20 million, or do you say, wait, that would rather invest in? So it'll be interesting how this plays out. We didn't get all of a sudden new capital spend to spend next year. It's the same capital we had last year.
Right.
So how do you carve that up? And it's going to be very interesting to see how this all plays out. But that's what we're doing, moving from saying no to saying no differently and learning and ideating and experimenting. And we've been experimenting with AI for many years. We have successful use cases with AI too, but it's just getting more concentrated. Right. And I think I pretty much speak for, many of my peers out there.
I think it's a reasonable approach. Now I think it's a reasonable approach from a philosophical standpoint, and maybe it doesn't address, say, an individual employee's concerns about being replaced or displaced.
Yes.
And that's a different conversation. That's getting into the nitty gritty with somebody and understanding what's important to them, what's important to the company.
Yes.
How do we keep, the balance of the value proposition, which there really is in every employment situation. There's a balanced, or should be a balanced value prop in each direction.
Yeah, we actually named the program Loop, and I presented this to the board a few weeks ago, and we did that on purpose because it signifies that humans are in a loop with this. Generative AI requires iterative and interactive dialogue between humans and artificial intelligence. So I think that we did that on purpose to sort of telegraph that this is not about taking jobs away; it's about augmenting jobs. You're in the loop with AI. So, and then we've got again, an incredible communications team. You met some of them. That's helping me kind of get the word out. And we have professional trainers going out, educating people and doing those ideation sessions. We call it it's called Reinventing sessions. So it's just a form of ideation and brainstorming. And I'm very excited about what's this reservoir of ideas that are going to come our way.
You've got a huge reservoir sitting there. So tell me something. So we're talking about AI and we're talking about application and all this and how, you look at it organizationally from a philosophical standpoint and what's happening. Where do you stand? And I'm curious on this. I made a comment earlier about IT is kind of like an amoeba that's splitting apart a little bit when you look at tech. And tech, I'm just loosely call that's your data science, your machine learning, your AI. Dependent on IT, on computers, on computing capacity, but not computers per se, if I can put it. I know it's a very simplistic way of putting it. I mean, as companies look at this stuff, some companies are going to just pack it all into the IT group. Some companies are going to split it out amongst different things because that's where the expertise is. It's not unlike a manufacturing company that maybe has a separate function of cost accounting or cost engineering outside of the finance and accounting group. So I'm curious, what your thoughts are around that. And again, not looking for anything specific that Avery Dennison's doing, but I'm curious to what the thoughts are in the marketplace too, because I think that's a big question, because it's all packed in IT. When you could argue that's a huge risk concentration, and you don't know if it's going to filter out into the organization. But if it's split out in a lot of different areas, you could take the opposite side of that argument. So I'm really curious about what your insights might be on that.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot, despite the let's just look at the market perspective for this tech talent. We've heard a lot about high tech industry layoffs and a slowdown in demand in some industries, like publishing and insurance, hit pretty hard, automotive parts. These are industries that are really pulling back on it. CIOs are report facing steep competition for critical IT talent, right? While navigating this challenge. So there's been a lot of layoffs in tech, and yet a lot of CIOs are hiring tech. So what is that all about? And it's also compounded by voluntary attrition that really outpaces any other function. Usually IT is although we have very low attrition in IT, so we're very fortunate in that.
That's usually a pretty good indicator of your leadership there. Just so you would know from a headhunting perspective.
I think we have a lot to offer. I can go through that. We've earned Computer World's Best Places to Work in IT 2023, but also earned it in 2021. So
wow, congrats on
some things
sides.
Right. I think it's helpful and I can get into that if you like. But what's interesting is the media I think the media gets it wrong. I think they assume that they talk about the high tech talent, lots of layoffs, right? Mm-hmm. What they're missing is that IT roles aren't limited to high tech companies. They never talk about that. You never hear about that on CNBC or anything. Right. It's all about the high tech role. But so that's, yes, they might be facing some layoffs, and I'm not saying other industries aren't, but a lot of traditional companies are hiring in IT, and I think that what makes it hard is that high tech talent doesn't always want to work in non-tech industries, and vice versa. So there's this challenge where we want to hire high tech talent, but they don't want to move over. And then our folks don't generally always want to go over to high tech. So it's just sort of like this, it is a separate bucket of people to some degree, right? And think about it. Even if high tech workers wanted to work in non-tech companies, where are the tech folks concentrated? We just talked about that. 15 cities in the US. And non-tech companies operate in about 310 medium-sized companies with populations over 100,000, right? So they're in the wrong location. There's a mismatch of skill, and there's lack of interest in sort of that cross-pollination. I'm speaking very generally here. Many people in the audience yelling at me, it's fine. But I think there's a mismatch of skill, interest, and location. And the media always talks about high tech talent, thinking that's the entire IT industry, and it's not. It's just talking about it, right?
Well, I mean, it's Bill Gates, like him or not like him, doesn't really matter. I think he's famous for the quote that all companies are tech companies now, and
yes, right.
I think there's a lot of truth to the notion that, especially going forward, and I mean, the momentum has been gathering, right? That you're either going to get on board or you're not. And if you're not, the risk of being left behind, falling behind the marketplace, not being able to deliver to your customers, not being able to innovate, not being able to collaborate. But, it's funny because we're kind of full circle in a sense. When we started, and I asked you the question about, non-traditional degrees and getting into the tech and IT space. Right. And this is kind of full circle on that to a degree. But what got me into tech recruiting was back in 17 or 18. I picked up a search for a large energy retail client, a retail energy client, I should say.
Okay.
And it was for a data science basically to come in, build a dashboard, and operate in real time this very large direct advertising budget. If direct mail is doing better, do it. If newspapers doing better, do it. If it's ads on Facebook or Snapchat or whatever, do it. And they said, we're probably gonna have to relocate someone from San Francisco, New York, or wherever. All 4 finalists, and it was a retained search. So we did it right. We didn't just throw paper on the wall. We had 4 finalists. Two, I was kind of maybe we'll have to see, but two, I was feeling pretty strong about. All four finalists were from the Houston area for a Houston-based company.
They were what? Sorry.
All four finalists were located in Houston.
Oh, Houston. Okay.
For a Houston-based opportunity. They weren't somewhere else. And what really intrigued me about it, because I didn't know at the time, I was looking all over the country, trying to find the right person. But what really intrigued me about it was that, to your point, somebody wanting to move from one of the coast into the deep South was a challenge. Because the hunting fields for other opportunities and their locations were pretty amazing at that point in time, and have been, for a long time. But there's a lot of talent out there that's not as glamorized or hyped or promoted, that's sitting out there if you're willing to dig for them. But it's hard, and to the point that the competition for those people can be a real challenge because there's not only so many of them to go around.
Yeah, and I think you have to really look at your talent acquisition strategies. You have to hunt them. You have to, I think and I think you have to really tailor your employee value proposition, which is what we do to really match, employee expectations. And compensation is a few things that we do. Compensation, I think is pretty general stuff, remains, I think, an essential driver of attraction and retention. So employees have high expectations when they're moving into a new company, a new role. They want to have an increase in compensation when they do that too, when they switch to employer. And then we've seen this trend really grow over the last couple of years, and we carefully ensure that compensation is commensurate with the market, and it stays that way throughout their employment. So we're constantly looking at the market, making sure, and obviously relative to performance. Flexibility is another area. So compensation, and then you have flexibility. People want to work remotely. They want to have hybrid. So demanding that people come into the office is just not going to work. I mean, I went into several different large, I'll mention them, technology providers, smaller ones, and those offices are bare. I mean, it's just amazing. Yeah. So the high tech people aren't going in. From what I saw, right? And I can even speak for my own company. You're just not getting sort of people that want to work full time, 5 days a week in the office. Maybe a couple of days if they're close by, that sort of thing. But also just, being flexible in terms of hours of work, the autonomy, giving people more autonomy is also a nice strategy. We talked about, I didn't answer your question about we do soften some of the requirements and allow for non-traditional backgrounds. I just mentioned before, I met with someone today that I'm really impressed with to fill critical skills. And, the IT partner role is one of those that you could make some accommodation for. So we don't always have to, candidates don't always have to have college degrees in IT and that sort of thing. Yeah. Continuous learning is another technical we use. So we, it's just given that the landscape is rapidly evolving and new technology is constantly coming out. And so we have an IT academy at Avery Dennison that provides on-demand training. It's role-based training, which is fantastic. So if you're a BA, you're a project manager, you're an infrastructure specialist, you've got a curriculum curated, especially created for your role. So we have a team that focuses on this, and we buy the best learning. We do. We also have. I mean, most people learn on the job through experiences.
Right.
But as you know, the online learning does help. You can get certified in different technologies
especially if it's something they can take forward with them.
Right. Yeah. We give out digital badges as well. We have an AI now. We're building out this AI track, so you can get a digital badge. People want digital badges. But there's also commercial, widely recognized certifications you can get in these programs too. We use Photosoft as one example. So that's really helping, and I think the IT market remains very competitive, and so we have to consider both John, internal as well as external candidates. And today, I think the figure is over 40% of our jobs year to date were filled by internal candidates. We call that internal.
That's good. You got to take care of your own house first, and if you don't, that house can rot. It can get hollow, and it's not a good. And it's funny I say that because I'm on the outside. I rely on companies going, "Hey, we either can't or we don't have time to do this. We're having trouble with it. We'll pay you to come do it." And those are my favorite companies. People who say that, but I always tell them too. One of the first questions is, especially if it's a hard to fill position, have you thoroughly exhausted your internal options? Yeah. Because you might have somebody ready to step into position A that's sitting in position B, but there's no one else you're finding that makes as much sense to step into it, but you can't lose them out of position B. Well, have you looked at who you have internally that could fill position B and free this person up to get to A? Um, and I don't get paid for that. That's really depressing. Thanks a lot, Nick. Now I'm sad.
Well, there's a 60% that we had to hire from outside. So the bigger portion is going out, but 40% I think is reasonable.
That's a good number. That's a good number. That's a good effort. Yeah. I mean, I think people working internally, look, not everybody's cut out to do whatever's next within an organization based on organizational needs. But if you're constantly giving them opportunities to prepare for what could be next, and then rewarding them with the opportunity to step into that role, or at least have the opportunity to do it, man, that stuff resonates when you're consistent with it.
I think we could be better at that part about individual development programs. I think that we have to, our managers have to work very closely with their staff to make sure that those staff members have really strong individual development programs. I think we do a better job with that, and just checking in, make sure that everyone has an IDP and they're working. We should only have the IT Academy. We have lots of projects. We do about 100 projects at any given time. There's about 100 projects going on, and more in the pipeline that's coming along. So we have plenty of opportunity to get on the job training, but also we have this online learning program as well. So and DE&I is another strategy, very much focus for us to tap into the power of a diverse and inclusive workforce. We have very high inclusion scores. I think we're over 91% inclusion. The last time we measured in 2022, we're going to do a survey now. So we're very big on making sure that people's, the voices are heard, that everyone has an opportunity to share their perspectives, and because collaboration is certainly key when you have an IT organization that's very matrixed. We have our shared services, and we have our BU teams. They're mostly business analysts that work very closely with the shared services that we offer.
Well, at the end of the day, a collaborative group of people who can get along, know how to work as a team, whether they're next door to each other or half a world away, doesn't matter.
Right.
In my experience, 8 out of 10 times when a person leaves a company or is pushed out of a company, it doesn't come down to whether or not they know a programming language or whether or not they know a particular hard skill. It comes down to their soft skills.
Right.
Because look, you guys have enough going on. If somebody wants to learn something, there's a real good chance they have the opportunity to learn it. They just got to go engage and do it and have the discipline, the regimen to go through it. And so it really comes down to, can I be perceived as a partner? Can I be perceived as collaborative? Right. And align with the culture and where we're all pulling the wagon in the same direction. But that leads me to, we talk about people coming from different backgrounds, people having different career paths, the impact of AI, which is going to be a hot topic for a while. But what we haven't touched on, even though we started, hey, tell us a little bit about Nick Colisto and how you got where you're at and your career path. But what we haven't talked about is what you might see as a passion project or a personal project for you that you'd really like to amplify or put more effort into, or just would like to raise its profile in the market. So I have as an example, I had a guest on a while back, and she is one of a handful in the U.S. of Asian American women who are in the C-suite, relatively handful. And part of her, I guess you could say, her passion project, which she wants to help people with, is help other Asian women promote their careers and get on a path to go to the C-suite if that's what they want to do with their career. So she's kind of gone to the top, and she's sending an elevator down to help other people. So I'm curious, what do you, I asked the question the first couple of podcasts I did. I said, so what's next for you? And I realized, well, that's a bad thing, because what if they're not happy? Or what if, or I don't want to put any doubt out there because it's not my point, my goal. But I'd really like to know, when you look in a mirror, you have your work and your career that you got to be happy with, that you've come so far and done so much and have so much going on and have a loyal following and in a great situation, a great context. But what else is it that you do that you're passionate about that really lights the fires for you?
Yeah, definitely. I say it's very easy to answer that one. So I'm the co-sponsor of Women in Leadership at Avery Dennison. So not just IT, but the whole company. And I'm very proud and honored to have that role with one of our GMs is a co-sponsor with me. And it's two men that are the co-sponsors. We did that on purpose. At first, I was like, why do you have two men being the co-sponsors? Wouldn't there be a woman in there? And they did that on purpose because they wanted to really, signal that this is important for this company, and men have to be strong allies to women in leadership. And the company is doing very, very well with gender diversity, but there's much more we can do. So any function has its own set of targets and all that. But so I'm really proud of that, and I work closely with my co-sponsor, and we have a DE&I team. We have a couple of different work streams. One is women. Yeah. And we focus on that. So that's that is definitely my passion. And it's just, it's not just for IT, it's across the board. And,
right.
It is really interesting that, first, it's about, I think there's a couple of different, we look at attracting. How do you attract women? How do you develop women, and how do you retain women? So we've got processes around that. We're just continuing to, so if this team that we have continues to invest, that's a whole nother webcast we could probably have, but how do we go about that? But we have lots of different programs, and so that's certainly my second job at Avery Dennison.
No, that's great. It's fantastic. Because look, at the end of the day, when we look at someone who's next to us, and whether they're male or female, or they're a different ethnicity or whatever, at the end of the day, I think there has to be a mental shift from I'm going to work because I'm collecting a paycheck to I'm going to work because I'm learning, I'm growing, and hey, I have this person next to me who's on a similar journey. And the best way for me to reach that end of the journey is to help them reach the end of the journey too. Right. Or whatever that goal or that milestone may be. I think when you look at your colleagues, your peers around you, upstream, downstream, wherever, and see them for what they are, as a human being who's got their own struggles and their own experiences, you're always stronger. As the old expression goes, a bundle of sticks is a lot stronger than one or two stuck together. Yeah. But to do that, you know what? You've got to be a stick, and you've got to be in the bundle.
Right.
And that's the mindset that people, I think, miss in a lot of situations. I appreciate the fact that you're doing that, because you're doing it across a huge organization. So the opportunity for impact is certainly there.
Yeah, the one form of diversity that's truly global, right? Because every region has other forms of diversity, right? So what might be a diversity challenge in the US, like getting more Hispanic and Black professionals in different roles, may not be the same challenge that you have in other countries, right? So, trying to come up with global diversity metrics are difficult, because the company is very regionalized, right? Gender is certainly a global problem. So I found that one to be the most challenging, but also the most rewarding in terms of being able to make a difference. And the company's on a great track. We put a lot of energy into this, and we have a lot of allies and a lot of women on these different committees to help come up with ideas to continue to advance our DE&I of women in leadership. So it's a good one.
That's a good one. Nick Colisto, CIO over at Avery Dennison, man. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an amazing conversation. And I think if we're lucky, maybe we'll have some more in the future. I really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure being on the podcast with you. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to Drowning in the Tech Talent Pool. This podcast is sponsored by Sabretooth. Sabretooth improves the quality of hire and speeds up the time to fill specialized machine learning, data engineering, data science, and developer roles, stretching tech recruiting budgets further by bringing the precision of retained search and the speed of contingent search to the market in one complete solution. Find out more at sbr2th.com and follow me, John Light, on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening.